We are continuing this morning in our sermon series entitled Chasing the Wind, as we've been looking at the book of Ecclesiastes. And so if you have your Bible, turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Before we jump in too far, we're going to review our memory verse. We haven't done this in a couple weeks, and so it's time to do this. It was kind of funny at the first service. I don't know if any of you were there. We could not figure out how to do this. Like you think, well, all we're doing is reciting our memory verse. Some people had it memorized. Other people were reading it off of the worship guide, which is in your worship guide. Other people were reading it off the screen. And I mean, I've done this several times. And so I'm like, all right, now we're going to recite the memory verse. And so we'd start, and it was just a big mumbled mess of whatever. I'm thinking, after we did this like 2 or 3 times, I'm thinking, it's not that hard, people. Just read it off the screen. Then I find out after the service, there was a different version on the screen than they had in the worship guide. So that's why we could never figure it out in the first service. But we got that fixed, and so I hope that you're working on hiding God's Word in your heart, memorizing this passage that goes with our sermon series. If you haven't started, it's one verse, so it doesn't take a super long amount of time, and I encourage you to do that this week. If you're new, that's awesome. You can just read along this morning. Hopefully we've got it all lined up now. But let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, and then we'll recite it or you can read it. But here we go. The end of the matter has been heard. Fear God, keep His commandments. This is the whole duty of man. See, that was so much better. It's amazing what happens. Let's read that one more time. The end of the keep His commandments. This is the whole duty of man. Great. I hope you'll work on memorizing that this week and hiding that in your heart. I've entitled this message as we look at Ecclesiastes chapter 9, Prepare to Die. I shared a couple weeks ago that one of my favorite movies is The Princess Bride. And I think a few weeks ago I actually quoted the part about marriage, where it says marriage. And not long after that I did a wedding and I almost went into that. And I had to refrain myself before it started. But there's another quote in that movie which I also just love. And it happens in about the middle, and it's this. See if you recognize it. Hello, my name is Emil Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. So I wanted to include that in my sermon this morning. Prepare to die. And when we prepare to die, only when we prepare to die can we really understand what life is about. And that's what Solomon is going to unpack for us in chapter 9. You see, for the past few chapters, Solomon has painted a picture for us that life lived without God and a life that's lived without eternity in mind is meaningless. It's impossible for us to find lasting purpose in this life if we don't believe that there is a God who reigns over it and that there is a life that comes after it. Chapter 9 opens and we see the problem of death. We see what happens when we don't understand how significant death is to how we live. With that in mind, let's read the first 10 verses of chapter 9. Would you stand with me as we honor the reading of God's Word? I'm going to begin, obviously, in verse 1. Here's what the Word of God says. It says, "But all this I laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. Whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before Him. It is the same for all, since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked, to the good and the evil, to the clean and the unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. As the good one is, so is the sinner. And he who swears is as one who shuns an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. Also, the hearts of the children of man are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live. And after that they go to the dead. But he who is joined with all the living has hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. And they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun. Go, eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white. Let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, that he who has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol to which you are going. Father, we thank you for your word. We know that it is true. We know that it is perfect. We know that it instructs and rebukes and corrects. It trains us in all that is righteous and good. It points us ultimately to your Son, Jesus, who is the author and perfecter of our faith. Father, I pray that as we look at this text this morning, that we may be reminded that life is short, that death is real, and that you are eternal. Father, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing and acceptable unto you, O Lord. You're my rock and my redeemer. I pray this in the matchless and glorious name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. I want to give us 4 truths that this passage teaches us about how we ought to prepare to die. The first one is that we must accept it. Accept death as a reality. Accept death as a reality. You know, we've been around people in our lives that we grew up with that were strong and healthy, and yet we see that even the strong and healthy eventually succumb to death. I left camp on Friday in a rental car and drove to Knoxville, where my wife spent the week with her parents and her father, who is on his last couple of weeks probably of life. And I remember when I first met him over 20 years ago, when Candace and I were dating, he ran a landscaping business, and he could do almost anything. He was, move stuff, haul stuff. He could fix anything. He was witty. He was funny. He was, just fun to talk to, and really could just do anything. I was just really always amazed at the amount of vast knowledge he had about all sorts of things that honestly was way outside of anything that I knew. He had a degree from the University of Tennessee in agriculture, and anybody who knows me that knows that's about as far away from anything I know as humanly possible. And so I always just enjoyed hearing him tell stories about raising sheep, and he just could do anything. And then I'm with him yesterday, maybe for the last time, and I'm just thinking about the man that he is and the man that he was, and just cannot even have a conversation anymore. And it just really made me think about this passage, about the fact that it doesn't matter how young and how strong, how smart and how wise and how witty and how fun, how caring or how nice. We're all coming to that point. We're all coming to that day. We may not know, you will not know most likely when that day is going to be. But then it will come. And we must embrace that. We must accept that that day will come. And that's what Solomon tells us in verse 1. He says, but all of this I laid to heart, examining it all. We ought to examine our lives. We talked last week before we had the Lord's Supper about examining our hearts before we come before the Lord's Supper. But really, life examination ought to happen frequently. We ought to think about who we are. What do I believe? What do my life stand for? What am I spending my time doing? How am I investing my resources? Am I walking faithfully in the kingdom with the King? And we ought to examine ourselves. And he says, we ought to examine our lives in light of the fact that we're going to die. He says, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hand of God. Remember last week I talked about if we don't have a full grasp on the fact that our God is sovereign over all things, we're really going to struggle in this book. Because Solomon holds no punches. And he talks about the situations and the circumstances of life and how good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. And we can't always make rhyme or reason of why that is. And so he really building off of that. He says, whether it is love or hate, man does not know. Both are before him. Whether it's love or hate. Sometimes we can be going through life and we feel like we're walking with the Lord, And yet everything bad seems to be happening to us. You've ever had that experience? It's like, I feel like I'm walking with the Lord. I don't know that there's a whole bunch of unconfessed, unrepentant sin in my life, and yet this is happening, and then my water heater goes out, and then I go to the doctor and I find out more news, and then I go to the dentist and I got to get a crown, and then my car gets rear-ended, and we could just go on, and it seems like all of these horrible things are happening. And then there's other times in which great things are happening. And we're like, I don't even know why these great things are happening. And if we sit on this side of heaven and we try to figure out what I'm doing or what God's doing or how this is doing or how that's doing, we'll get just lost in the weeds. What he's saying is whether it's love or hate, whether it's good or bad, man does not know. It can be so easy to think when things are not going our way that, man, God must really hate me. God must be really mad at me. He's letting all these bad things happen to my life. But let's take a step back and look at somebody like the Apostle Paul. I mean, it's hard to argue that there's a better Christian that's ever walked, the follower of Christ, than the Apostle Paul. And yet what does Paul say? I've been shipwrecked. I've been snake bitten. I've been beaten. I've been flogged. I've been jailed. I've been persecuted. Well, it's hard. We would never say, well, gosh, Paul must not be walking with the Lord. No. Paul was receiving all of the things that God had coming from him in His sovereign plan. Now, there were good things that happened to Paul too. He was in jail praising the Lord and the chains fell off of him. So there's good and there's bad. And that's the point of Ecclesiastes. Is we're going to face good times or bad times. We don't know, he says. Man does not know. Both of them are before us. And then he says in verse 2, it is the same for all. Since the same event happens to the righteous and the wicked. What's that event? It's death. The same event happens to good people and bad people. The same event happens to rich people and poor people. In fact, he just listed out to the good and to the evil, to the clean, to the unclean, to him who sacrifices and to him who does not sacrifice. Right? Those who walk closely with God die. Those who are far from God die. Those who give a lot of money to the temple die. Those who don't give anything to the temple die. Those who are nice to people die. Those who are mean to people die. Those who are evil die. Those who are good. Everybody dies, he says. He says, as the good one is, so is the sinner. And he who swears is as he who shuns an oath. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all people. What is he saying? It's not fair. It's not fair. This is an evil in all that is done under the sun, that the same event happens to all. Now, why does the same event happen to all? The same event happens to all because all are sinners. Let's go back to when we were in Genesis chapter 1 and 2 a few months ago, right? God created the heavens and the earth. He made us in His image. He put Adam and Eve in a garden where none of this happened. Think about that. In the Garden of Eden, they walked with God. There was no lack of food. There was no cancer. There was no one rear-ending their car. There was no insurance denials. There was nobody being mean. All things were good. And then sin shows up. And then there's a curse. And then we find out that the wages of sin is death. And everybody is impacted by sin. Every single one of us. And so therefore, now everything happens to everyone. Or the same thing happens to everyone. We all die. He also goes on and says, also the hearts of the children of man are full of evil, right? Why? Sin has come into the world. There's no one righteous, no, not one. And madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. We will all die. We must accept death as a reality. Warren Wiersbe said, death is not an accident, it's an appointment. Death is not an accident, it's an appointment. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27 says it this way, just as it's appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. Everyone will die. We should just accept that as reality. The second thing we can see in the text is that we ought to prepare to die so that we can actually live. We ought to prepare to die so that we can actually live. Look with me at verse 4. But he who is joined with all the living has hope. See, hope is the thing that sets the living apart from the dead, because once you die, you're in eternity. There's no making up for things that you've done here. There's no being nice to people you were mean to. There's no asking for forgiveness. There's no thinking about eternity once you're in eternity. When you're in eternity, you're there. So you know when the decision, when is the time to make a decision about where you're going to spend eternity is? Now. It's now. Because once you close your eyes and open them in eternity, your destination is set permanently. So when then ought we to make a decision about where we want to spend it? It ought to be while we're breathing, while we're capable, while we're sensitive to the Spirit of God working in our life, and we don't push away the work of God. We say, God, I'll receive that free gift that you give in Jesus Christ. That's when we do it. Now. Not next week because you're not promised next week. Not next year because you're not given next year. 2 Corinthians says, today is the day of salvation. Now is the time. Prepare to die so you can actually live. But he who is joined with all the living has hope. And then I love this phrase. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. Now, what does that mean? A living dog is better than a dead lion. Now, if you're thinking about your dog at home, Fluffy, and you're thinking, well, how sweet Fluffy is, and I love it when Fluffy crawls up on my lap and gives me kisses, and then you're thinking about the wrong kind of dog. Because in Old Testament times, dogs were not pets. Dogs were a nuisance. They were scavengers. They ran the streets. They stole food. They did all sorts of things. They're painted in a very, very bad light. In fact, in the Old Testament, we see dogs being named as animals that licked King Ahab's blood and ate Jezebel's corpse. And that's the kind of dog we're talking about. The lowest of the low, the nasty, the unclean. And then we think about a lion, and what do we think about? A majestic animal. Beautiful, powerful, strong. The apex of the food chain, not a dog who scavenges in the trash left out behind the restaurant at night. And that's the picture that Solomon wants us to paint. And then he makes these profound words. He says, it's better to be a living dog, bottom, than to be a dead lion at the top. Why? Because he says it's better to be alive than dead. Why? Because when you're alive, there's an opportunity for transformation. There's an opportunity for hope. There's an opportunity for change. There's an opportunity for rescue. But when you are dead, it is over. And so it doesn't matter if you lived your entire life as an apex lion, you had all of the wealth, all of the power, all of the strength, all of the wisdom, all of the degrees, all of the stuff. When you're dead, it will not matter. And so what matters is that you're alive right now, no matter how much you may have messed your life up, no matter if you feel like you are the lowest on the food chain, you are still alive, and therefore God is still at work in your life. It's better to be a living dog than a dead lion. Verse 5, for the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. While you're alive right now, I can tell you that you're going to die, and you can think about that. And therefore, if there's some changes you need to make in the way that you live, you can do that. But he's saying, but when you're dead, you cannot change that. It's gone. The dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Verse 6. Their love and their hate and their envy has already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that's done under the sun. It's over. It's gone. They're dead. Reminds me of where we find wisdom. The psalmist writes in Psalm 90, teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Who are the wise among us? The ones who accept that they're going to die and prepare to die. Why? Because now we can truly live. Once we know my eternity is settled, now I can live my life in a way that I can experience all that God has for me because I'm not worried about that moment anymore. I'm not worried about, well, am I going to have to do this? Or what if I don't get to do that? I don't have to worry about those things anymore. I can rest. And when I can rest in comfort, knowing that my eternity is sealed and secured, then I can truly live for the glory of God. So how do we live then? How do we live in a way that maximizes what God has done in the life that God has given us? Well, he tells us, this is the third point, seek joy in the life that you have. Seek joy in the life that you've been given. Look at verse 7. He tells us right here, here's how you do this. He says, go, eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart. For God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white. Let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love. Now let's kind of unpack these things, because these are things that we can do, simple things. I didn't say easy things, but simple things that we can do to really maximize the enjoyment of knowing God in this life. And the first one he says is, eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart. He's saying everybody enjoys a good meal. Everyone enjoys a good meal. I don't know about what you grew up in, but my family, we were a believing family. My parents walked with Christ, and so, coming to the table together was an important part of who we were. We ate dinner together, and we, went to meals together. We didn't have a ton of money, so we weren't eating out all the time. But when we would go out, it would be fun and special. And then at Christmas, on Christmas Eve, that was always a really special time. Thanksgiving too, but Christmas Eve, we would go to the Christmas Eve service together, and then we would come home, and my mom would decorate the table with wreaths and Christmas things and candles, and there was always this incredible spread of food that we didn't eat all the rest of the year. It was kind of like, this is the Christmas casserole, Can't eat that in July. It's only for Christmas. So we would have a special spread of food. Everybody would look good because we'd just come from the Christmas Eve service. We'd take pictures. We'd read the Bible. But we all gathered around a great meal together as a family. Now, I'm embarrassed to say that's not what happens in my house currently, and that's no fault of Candace's. It's just the nature of doing 2 Christmas Eve services where I basically am here all night. And so now, I hate to say this because I told this in the early service, they were all poking fun at me. But like my Christmas Eve now, and I learned this the hard way, because when we lived in Florida, we just had Hadley and Shepherd at the very end, but we had Hadley, and so we did 2 Christmas Eve services there, but things in Florida stayed open, like until 9 or 10. So we would do our second Christmas Eve service, and then Candace and I, we would go out to eat together, because it was just too much to try to put stuff together for the 3 of us. So we would just go out to eat. So we get here, and we're like, we'll just go out to eat after the second service. Well, the problem was, by the time we finished the second service, there was nothing open. Everything here closes at like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock on Christmas Eve. And so the first year that we were here, we had to go to Burger King for our Christmas Eve dinner. And if anybody knows me, I hate Burger King. In fact, I hate Burger King so much that when my kids were little, I told them a little lie. I told them I was allergic to Burger King. And so we never had to go there. I mean, to the point where we would be driving down the road and be like, where should we stop and eat? And somebody would say, oh, there's Burger King. Oh, wait, we can't go there because Dad's allergic. I had that thing going for a long time, and now I just say we're just not going. But we had to go to Burger King. There's literally nothing left. It's either that or like eat cereal at home, and that was really tempting, right? But now we've got a better system. It's not a whole lot better. We still don't have like a really nice meal, but we've ordered ahead of time Chinese. And so now we just go over and pick up our China cottage. We go home, we eat it on the paper plates and the plastic spoons and forks, and we're done, right? And so it's kind of embarrassing that we don't do that, but it's Christmas Eve is such a busy time. But his point here, that was an aside, his point here is that we ought to enjoy eating together because it's good to be around the table with people you love, people you care about, because you laugh around the table and you share stories around the table, and sometimes you weep around the table, and sometimes you just enjoy being with the people around the table. And that's what we ought to see in life, that some of the greatest joys are the simple things like a Christmas Eve dinner or a date out with your wife or your spouse. He goes on and he says, let your garments be always white. What does he mean there? Well, in the Middle East at that time, or now too, you don't want to wear a lot of black. It's hot. The sun is out, and it's not great to wear black. A lot of people dress in light-colored clothing. Also, when you wore dark-colored clothing, it usually indicated there was some type of death or funeral. It's not, you wouldn't wear white to the funeral. You wear white to go to a party, to celebrate. And so he's saying, you wear white, let your garments be white. Enjoy the things of life. Put on your nice outfit. Then he says, let not oil be lacking on your head. Well, oil during that day was more than just a grooming product. It was to keep their skin from drying out in the hot, arid sun. And they would put oil on their head to keep their hair lubricated. They didn't have shampoo like we have shampoo today. It would also cover up any bad smells you have because they weren't bathing like we bathe today. I just got back from camp. I hung out with middle schoolers. They don't bathe like adults bathe. Some of them needed some oil put on their head. They call that Axe body spray now. But what he's saying is put on the white garments. Clean yourself up. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love. Be around people you care about. If you're married, invest in your marriage. Spend time with your spouse. If I could sum up this whole thing, it's, hey, guys who are married, schedule a date with your wife. Get dressed up. It doesn't have to be tuxedos, but don't wear your shorts and your flip-flops. Get dressed up. Take a shower. Put on your Old Spice. Comb your hair. Get cleaned up. And then go out to dinner somewhere a little bit different than where you usually go. Enjoy the time. It may only be an hour. Maybe that's all the time you have. Maybe it's 2 hours. But go and take some moments with your spouse, with your family. If you're not married, find some friends that you enjoy being around. And go and have a good time. Splurge on the ice cream. Do something that really will bring a sense of joy and excitement to your life. It's not a lot, but what he's saying is everything doesn't have to be, we're going on a vacation to Hawaii. Sometimes the best things in life are the simple things with the right people. And he's saying, enjoy that. Verse 9, enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life. In your toil in which you toil under the sun. Enjoy that because life is hard. Life will beat you down. Life will rob you of joy. And so when you have moments around the table, when you have moments of great intimacy with friends and family, you need to stop and say, I am going to enjoy this. Because I'm not promised dinner next week. And I'm not promised something next year. So I'm going to take this moment to be joyful. He goes on and says this, verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. So the last thing, after you get up, get dressed, have a great meal, enjoy it, he's like, find things in your life that you enjoy doing. Some of you may enjoy gardening. Then garden for the glory of God. Some of you may enjoy listening to music. Well, then listen to music for the glory of God. Some of you may enjoy playing sports. Play sports for the enjoyment of God. Find yourself something, a hobby, an activity that you enjoy and find joy in doing it. It's okay. It's okay to have hobbies. It's okay to enjoy doing things. If you work out, love that. Run, cook, whatever it is. Do that. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. It reminds me of how Paul says it in Colossians chapter 3, where he says, and whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God for God the Father through Him. So as you're cooking, worship Him. As you're fiddling with your junk in the garage, think about Him. As you're gardening, garden with His presence. He is the vine, you are the branches. There's so many ways to incorporate thinking and enjoying God just in the common things that we do. Whatever we do in word or deed, do everything in the name of Jesus. So he finishes with, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol. That's just the grave. Like in the grave, when we're dead, you won't be gardening. You won't be cooking in the grave. You won't be playing basketball in the grave. And so enjoy those moments now while you are still alive. Seek joy in the life that you have. And then the last thing, it's not in this text, but I wanted to speak about it because I think it's important for us to think about it. The fourth one is this: build a life that will last in eternity. Build a life that will last in eternity. While we obviously ought to do these things of enjoy the moments, we ought to recognize that as we think about life and we think about the fact that it will come to an end, what kind of legacy will we leave? What kind of investment are we making in the kingdom? This is how Paul describes the way that we ought to build a life. He says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. He says, according to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one take care how he builds upon it. What is Paul talking about? He said, as you build your life, as you're going on thinking about life, there's something being built here. We're all building something with our lives. He says, now the foundation ought to be the same. We ought to all build our foundation, our life, upon the foundation of Christ. Verse 11, for no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. When Jesus talks about this, he says, build your life on the rock, not on the sand. Why? Because if you build a life on the sand, when the winds of the world come, and it will just blow your life over and there'll be nothing left. But if you build your life on the rock, then when the winds and storms of life come, your life will be secure in Christ. So he says, no one can lay another foundation, so lay your life's foundation, or build your life on the foundation of Jesus Christ. And then he says this in verse 12. Now if anyone builds on the foundation, so we've got Christ as the foundation, now we're building our life, the decisions we make, the investments we have, the time we spend. If anyone builds his foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it. What is he saying? He's saying you can build your life with things that matter in eternity that will last when the fire burns it up, or you can build your life with stuff like wood, straw, and stubble that as soon as the match is lit, the thing will deteriorate and you will have nothing left to show for your life. He said, the day will disclose it. You see, when we stand in judgment before God, all the deeds of our life, all the words that we said, all of the time that we spent, all of the money that we used, it will be exposed bare. He says, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. So the investments we make in eternity, we will reap the returns in eternity. But if we invest in the things of this world, of which the day will disclose and burn up, then we will have no reward to reap in eternity. Now you might be thinking, well, what kind of reward am I going to get? Scripture talks about that to some degree, but with not a lot of detail. But I'm going to tell you this. If you're worried about what reward you're going to get, you're missing the greatest reward there is. You see, the greatest reward, listen closely, the greatest reward anyone can experience when they die is eternity with Jesus. If you're worried about whether or not I'm going to get a ruby or a sapphire or a jasper, whatever jasper is, if you're worried about the reward I'm going to get, how big is my mansion in heaven going to be, you're missing the reward. Because the reward, my friend, is Jesus. The reward is spending eternity with Him. He will be all you care about. When you close your eyes in this earth and you open them in eternity and you see Jesus face to face, I promise you, you won't be asking, where's my mansion again? You will fall on your knees before Him. He is all that you will want. And He is all that you will need. And to hear Him say the words, my friends, "Well done, my good and faithful servant," will be the most glorious words you will ever hear. But you see, my friends, not everyone is going to close their eyes and open them in eternity and hear those words. Without a relationship with Jesus, you're going to close your eyes and open them in eternity, hearing the words, "Depart from me, I never knew you." And my friends, I don't want you to hear those words. And I bet you don't want to hear those words. So here's the good news. The good news is you're still alive. You are the dog that's still alive. You're not the lion that is dead. And because you're still alive and you're still breathing, today is the day you can call upon the name of Jesus. Today is the day of salvation, Paul says in 2 Corinthians. He says, now is the time. Today is the day. My friends, don't miss this opportunity, this very moment in which you can call upon the name of Jesus for your salvation. And you might be saying, well, I don't know what to say. That's okay, I'm going to help you. I'd just like for everyone just to bow their head and close their eyes. And if you just need to call upon the name of Jesus, here's what you just need to say. You don't have to use these exact words. It's not some riddle or some kind of magic word you say. It's your heart calling out to Jesus. You just need to say, Jesus, I know that you are the creator and sustainer of life. I know that I'm a sinner. I know I'm a dirty, rotten dog like this passage talks about. And I'm far from you. I'm broken and messed up. I've done all sorts of things that I would be ashamed of. I am a sinner. And I know that you came into this world to save me from my sin. You are the Son of the living God. And you came and lived a perfect life that I could not live. And you died in my place. I deserve to die for my sin, but you died in my place. And I received the free gift of grace that you give me through it. I know, Jesus, that once you were crucified, you were buried in a grave. And on the third day, you were raised from the dead, showing us that when we place our faith, life, and trust in you, you forgive us of our sin and you grant to us a raised and resurrected eternal life. And I believe that you are the only way to heaven. And you, Jesus, are my eternal reward. Thank you.